It's Bullseye. I'm Jesse Thorn. We've got a special episode for you this week. We're bringing you highlights from my brand new podcast, The Turnaround. On the show, I talk with some of the greatest living interviewers about the process of interviewing. Next up, Marc Maron. He's a stand-up and actor. He hosts one of the biggest podcasts ever, WTF with Marc Maron. It's recorded out of his garage, Los Angeles, in the Highland Park neighborhood. Maron does long, kind of free-form conversations with comedians, musicians, actors, once President Barack Obama. But when you listen to WTF, you aren't just listening for the guest. Maron is a very big personality, and it shows in his interviews. He's not rattling off a list of questions. He's giving a really intimate and revealing conversation with his guests. It doesn't always go great. It always reveals a lot about the guest, even when they're not into it. Here's a little bit of him talking with one of his first interview walkouts ever. The guest is Gallagher, the comedian who is famous for wearing suspenders and smashing watermelons.
If a comedian talks about himself, and that is funny, if a comedian is a storyteller, by your rubric, you're dismissing.
He can't
people.
work a state fair.
Who the wants to work a state fair necessarily?
Oh, everybody.
Really?
Yeah.
So in order to work a state fair, you have to take the Gallagher class.
You have to work faster and more general. There are families out there, and they're not interested in your long, subtle stories.
Okay, that's fine. That's the state fair circuit. But the comedy club circuit, the cabaret circuit, can indulge in different. Why can't you just see it as all being part of show business? Why are you angry?
Because there's no show involved.
What?
They're a bunch of slovenly. They hunch over. They turn their back on the audience. They take a
That's
drink
their style.
of water.
It's show business. Why are you drawing lines?
Why are you taking the other side of everything I say?
I'm not. I'm just saying
you are.
Why
did you want me to do this interview if you don't think I know anything about what you're asking me about?
I'm just telling.
I'm done.
You're done?
I'm done. You're just arguing.
Marc Maron, welcome to The Turnaround. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you. The Turnaround. Is this one of 900 Max Fun shows?
I guess.
What is the turn? Is it?
I needed more podcasts, Mark.
Well, where did you come up with that name? What is that name about?
It's a nice Hank Mobley record that I like. But I couldn't come. I'm terrible at coming up with names.
Hank Mobley.
Well, one thing is, I've been on your show a couple of times before.
Yeah.
You don't even tell people that you're starting.
Right. I thought we started right when we walked in. That was my assumption that everybody does it like that now. That's the power of me.
You had a nationally syndicated radio show.
Yeah.
You've been on 10,000 people's radio shows and podcasts.
Right.
So you know how it works. You'd been on many people's podcasts, I'm sure, before you started your podcast, which was a long time ago.
Not too many. There weren't that many. There was a couple.
You've probably been on, had you been on Pardo's podcast?
At that point, I don't think I was on Pardo's podcast till after I started a podcast. I don't think my knowledge of podcasting really happened until after. But I knew he was out there.
I don't believe you when you say that you thought that it just worked, that you start recording without telling people, and everyone just wanders in. Well, I think that was a choice, Mark. I'm not saying it was a trick. I think it was a choice.
I don't see any reason not to do it that way. It became a habit for me because the people that I interview have to walk through my house. So I have to try not to talk too much about anything other than, do you want a coffee? Do you need, and that is good. Like, I'll make people tea sometimes. If I have to make them tea or coffee, then I have to be careful about talking too much. Let them use the bathroom, help them down the stairs, let them see my house. And then we get out there and I try to get the thing on. Sometimes I'll go out and turn it on before we get into the garage. So I'll turn on the thing just so everything happens organically, that they walk in, they have a reaction to the space, they sit down, and they get comfortable. And I like that moment. There's a moment there where people, they don't shift into being interviewed mode.
Right.
Like the surprise, and it just is a testament to how many people don't necessarily listen to the show before they come over.
Right.
But that moment where they're like, wait, are we doing it? And now, yeah, we've been doing it. So you're kind of getting a more authentic, immediate thing there.
Do you ever wonder what it would be like to do your show if it wasn't in your house?
Kinda, but...
Because you did radio for years. You know what it's like.
I do, and I can focus on you, but there is something about for, what it does for me personally. That, in having people over, having them, making them comfortable, making them a coffee, showing them the deaf black cat on the back deck if it's there, having them react to the environment, then coming in it actually serves as a, come over and hang out thing. So I acknowledge that it's a job because I do a lot of them. And when I go out there and sit by myself and talk on the mic, I know I have to do it. And we do have to have a show up tomorrow, whatever. But there's something about the element of having someone over and having a conversation that still keeps it sort of casual in my brain, and sort of special and not work-like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like, we're in my studio in my office now.
It's a box.
It is. But for years and years and years, I did my show from my house.
I did it there once.
Yeah. And, one of the reasons that I would get dressed for it is so that people would know that I wasn't going to murder them.
Yeah, well, there's a couple things. I don't know that wearing the fancy pants and shirts make you any less threatening.
Yeah.
Number one. Number two, it's a real issue at my house, too. I have to have a part-time assistant because I don't really want people in my house. Yeah. I have one bathroom, there's nowhere for people to sit. So when they come, if I'm alone, that means I got to go out in the garage with the guest, and anywhere from 1 to 5 people are in my house, just unmanaged. Now, I don't think that, most people are bringing criminals over, but I don't know. And there's not much to steal, and I don't know what they're going to do. I just don't want them to let a cat out or whatever.
Did you know what your show was going to be when you started your show?
No. I didn't have no idea. It was all, a flurry of panic and desperation. We had been taken off the air in New York, and we wanted to do a podcast because we knew that the medium was an option. And we did segments. WTF actually was supposed to be a thematic thing. It was lighthearted in a lot of ways. We experimented with having a crew in the room, 1 or 2 people. We did short interviews. We tried to do bits that were refillable. We did phone interviews. It was sort of a mishmash of radio ideas in a lot of ways. But we knew we had freedom. And when I moved out here, when you came over, and when I bought the wrong mic initially, and told me how to operate GarageBand, and I still do it exactly the same way. The 2 things you showed me how to do, how do I make it bigger? Well, you click on the little one. Oh, good. And I still do that. And every time I do that, I'm like, Jesse showed me how to do that. So, no idea.
When did you decide, oh, okay, I guess that what this show is an interview show? Not that it's exclusively an interview show, but that is what the show is about.
Yeah, I don't know that I ever framed it quite like that. I still feel like they are conversations. I'm wary to call myself an interviewer. I can do that sometimes, and I do that. But I think that what was starting to happen is I was just having people over. And usually it was initially catching up. What do I know about you? Are you who I think you are? A lot of times I'm working against my assumptions. We all make these assumptions about people. And some of these people I knew for decades and I'd never had a conversation with. So as those things became resonant with me personally and started to function for me as a real kind of spiritually nourishing thing to have conversations with people and also to make amends with people and also to reconnect with the comedy community, I felt like I was kind of in out off the grid, and I was very depressed at the beginning. But it became sort of a conversation show, and it became really, the conversations were relative to my respect or disrespect for that person, and also primarily are you who I think you are, and convince me otherwise.
Well, I think I think that is one of your top moves, so to speak.
Yeah.
And I don't mean, it's not a transactional thing, obviously. It's a very sincere and open-hearted thing.
Mm-hmm.
But, one of your moves is essentially a kind of challenge to the guest.
Used to be more, yeah.
All right, well, I think you're this. What
Yeah.
do you say?
It's kind of like that. I don't, and it's weird because what I've learned over time is those perceptions are always limited. And if there are people that you know from their work that you're manufacturing almost all of it other than some sort of innate sense of who they are beyond their work, which is very small. It's just a kernel of a humanity thing that you're making assumptions based on their music or the roles they play or the comedy they do or what they've written or whatever. And you build a person in your head. I mean, that's what we all do. That's how we believe things. That's how we develop relationships with celebrities or public people, is that you build this person that has given you this information. And the information is not an hour's worth of information. It's this weird assumption. And I think that you can see the person in there. So I think that's sort of what I'm trying to do. And a lot of times my instincts are wrong. They're mostly wrong, but they're not wrong in the sense that like I misread somebody. They're just extremely limited to my idea.
You're listening to Bullseye. I'm Jesse Thorn. My guest is Marc Maron. He's the host of the podcast WTF. Part of the frisson of your show, I think, is that you, while you want / need to connect with people, and in some way that is the premise of your show, the secondary part of it is that doing so is in some ways not something you're entirely comfortable with. Like stand-up comedy is this kind of, even though your stand-up comedy has always been so focused on how can I reveal something really revealing, but then make you laugh about it. Like that's, I feel like when I watch you do stand up, especially when it's not your absolute most polished set.
Yeah.
What you're doing is like almost a contest to yourself.
Yeah.
Of like, if I say this thing, can I make it funny?
Right.
But I feel
Sometimes,
I feel like that is in the context of this very ritualized thing, which is stand-up comedy. You have all the power. You go hold a microphone.
Right.
You know how to make. You're making people laugh. You're dominating them in a way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that is comfortable because it has that context around it.
Uh-huh.
And on your show, I think part of what makes it interesting is that you are always fighting against an instinct to be a performer and have a comfortable distance because part of your show is, and part of your life goal is, make a connection.
Right. I've gotten better at that. And sometimes I'll try to entertain people. Like sometimes I think with people I'll try to charm people or be flirty or try to get laughs if I think it'll get things going. But I've gotten very much better at listening. I still finish people's sentences sometimes or cut people off, but it's fairly I do it on purpose. It's like it evolved into something that it wasn't initially. Like I needed to connect. It was part of my tools for connecting. But now I'll cut people off because I want to go somewhere else. Like a lot of times I'll interrupt people because I've become somewhat instinctively savvy of public narrative. So, like, how do you get around a public narrative? It becomes very tricky. And all I'm looking for in the podcast is not only connection, but to get the tone of the conversation into something organic and authentic. And usually it can happen. Sometimes it won't happen till a half hour in. I'm not saying that first half hour is bad, but I feel when it gives way. And that is the experience I want people listening to have. That's when I get emails. If I get emails that are like, why didn't you ask about this or that? I can't believe you didn't talk about that. It's like, it's not really that important to me. You know, maybe that's important to you, but sometimes I'll be like, well, maybe I should have. But other times I'm like, if you know that information or that information's accessible, I don't mind people telling it to me in the way they're going to tell it to me. But what's better is, and one of the things that this medium is powerful at is conveying tone, emotional tone. And something shifts when something gets candid or there's a little bit of emotional risk. You feel it in your whole body with audio. So why not spend time in that place to where it's sort of like loose and people are like, I can't believe they're talking about this. I'm just hanging out.
Right. That intimacy is something that people are thrilled by.
Yeah, and even if they don't know exactly what it is. Like if I get a person that's done a million things and they don't talk about any of them, but it's a great conversation, to me that's like a big win.
Yeah, sometimes I feel like you've interviewed Terry Gross and I'll interview her for this show. And she's someone who, professionally, reveals very little about herself. When she talks about movie hosts on TV in New Jersey, she lights up. Like she'll say someone will mention something about it, some interview guest. It's maybe happened. We've probably been listening to Fresh Air 20 years. And, somebody will mention something and she lights up. And you think wow, that is something that is completely incidental to the world, but a genuine emotional key for her.
Those are important things in conversation. Those are exciting. But having the opportunity to interview her at her request in front of an audience of 2,000 at the Brooklyn Academy of Music Opera House was sort of a big deal for me. I really am proud of that thing because, like you said, there's very little information out there about her. So what I had to do, which I don't love doing, is a type of research. I think I do this kind of research anyways, but with her it was very specific because she's such a mysterious person. And all of us have had the experience of talking to her alone by ourselves, over a mic, and she's somewhere else. People have been interviewed by her. But you look at the public narrative that's available, and it's very little.
I also want to make it clear, if they need me to do that, I'm available as
okay.
well.
I
haven't done it, so it's not quite all of us, but I am available
to be on Fresh Air.
If they need me to be on Fresh Air, I'll be there.
Okay, this is good.
Yeah,
I'm so close to pushing some button that will make you really frightening. So, but the chronology of her life had some very big holes in it. And I knew going in, that's where she became her. And this is where, there were these gaps. She started here, she did this, she did that. But it's what happened there? But the more beautiful thing about it is that, the night that we have to go out there, it's a big audience, it's a big room. And I'm a comedian. And this is more about me than it is about her, is that, she was sitting over there and I'm sitting here and there are people who love her. And I'm here, it was one of those nights where I really realized, I'm here to service Terry and to make this go well for her. And to, and to make sure she, is okay during all this. Because she's not a live performer.
Right.
And she's...
and because I think also, you're fully capable of doing it. You did a wonderful job. But because your normal context is a show that is in significant part about you.
Right. And in my garage.
Yeah. And you're recognizing, I'm on Terry Gross's stage, not in my house.
Well, right. But, but I've gotten a little more gracious over time.
You're very gracious, Marc.
But the weird thing is that I wanted to keep it lively, but I didn't want to upstage her. I wanted the interview to be what I do and to reveal things to me and to the audience that people didn't know about her, and and I wanted her to feel good about it. Because there were moments on stage, because I'm in awe of her, and there's a lot of respect there, and I'm doing these questions, and it's happening. The stuff that the areas that I thought were interesting turned out to be interesting, and people really learned things about her that they didn't know. And I think there was a couple points where she's like, I'm not gonna go there, and she was in control to a degree, but she was still letting out things that the public didn't know. And there were moments there where I could have made a joke, or I really made choices to not upstage or cut her off or take advantage of the audience. That in a way that I could innately do and is my instinct. And I think I was just very proud of it. And I think she had a great time. And I felt good that she had a great time because I know she doesn't like doing that. And, we communicate occasionally. And I have a picture of her and I on stage in my house. And apparently she has one in her office as well.
Oh, that's really nice. How do you feel when you interview people that you don't know about?
There's most people I don't know about. And sometimes, Brendan, sometimes he'll go look and see if someone's done interviews somewhere and he'll be like, yeah, they can talk.
Right.
So sometimes that's all I need to know. They can talk. And I'm like, okay.
That. We check that sometimes too when I'm not sure.
Yeah. Werner Herzog that wasn't easy for me. You just interviewed him. Yeah. He decided that he was going to disagree with everything I say.
He's good at that too.
Yeah. But there was a couple of moments that were beautiful. If I can get 10 beautiful moments, 10 minutes, Not 10 moments. 10 minutes of like, wow, it was right there. That was it. That was the 10 minutes.
Well, Marc, thank you for taking all this time to do this. I'm very grateful to you.
Thank you. I'm sweaty.
Marc Maron, everybody. My full interview with him, it's an extra half hour, 45 minutes or so, is on my new podcast, The Turnaround. You can find it at MaximumFun.org, our website, or wherever you get podcasts. And be sure to check out Maron in the brand new Netflix series, Glow, which comes out June 23rd. Seen the previews for that. It looks really fun.